This is Tomoya Tomita, a video game composer most known for his works on Kirby's Epic Yarn, Wario Land Shake It, and Yoshi's Woolly World. He worked at Goodfeel, a second-party game studio for Nintendo, although Mr. Tomita has been in the industry for a long time since 1988 at Konami, working on the Castlevania and Goemon series. I interviewed Mr. Tomita about his time in the games industry, using mostly questions from you guys over on Twitter and Reddit. I'm going to start using the branding mass views for the interviews I do, putting a spin on the word interview by adding in mass to represent how these interviews are mostly just questions from you guys, the masses. Without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Question 1. Firstly, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you've been up to nowadays? Hello everyone, I primarily create music and sound effects for games. Most of my career was spent at Konami. Some notable titles I've worked on include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, NES, and Animaniacs, SNES. Later on, I contributed to Nintendo titles such as Wario, Kirby, and Yoshi. Recently, I've been involved in projects like the Tokyo Game Show VR and the Magic the Gathering VR event. Additionally, I've mainly participated in sound effects for Cricket, Jay's really particular game. In case you were unaware, Mr. Tomita is currently doing freelance work. He left Goodfeel in 2017 due to one of their offices shutting down, but he's open to working with the company again in the future. Question 2. What was it like to work on Nintendo games creatively? How much freedom were you given? I believe I was able to create very freely. Regarding the direction of the music, I was able to control it myself, so it was an ideal environment without any unnecessary stress. This is really nice to hear. You'll see later in the interview, but seemingly a lot of second-party Nintendo studios really do get a lot of freedom while developing. Question 3. Out of all the series you have composed for throughout your career, which has been your favorite? Certainly Kirby, Yoshi, and Wario. It was very fulfilling to be able to compose music again after not being able to do so for a while at Konami. And yes, even after listening to the NES titles like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Contra Force now, they don't sound that bad at all. This is completely understandable. Working on such massive and beloved IPs is such a one-of-a-kind experience not many can say they've done. Question 4. What's a series you would love to compose for? Let me think. For now, there's nothing specific, but if I had to say, I'd love to create funkier music for a game like Wario. Question 5. Is there any piece you composed that you wish you could rework/add to? Certainly. While there are a few songs where I'd like to redo the mixing, I'm generally satisfied with my compositions. Perhaps there are a few areas I'd like to tweak after all. Question 6. The track Yoshi's and Cookies from Yoshi's Woolly World contains a motif from Flower Fields from Kirby's Epic Yarn. Do you recall how this came to be? Did anyone notice within Goodfeel? I don't think anyone noticed, at least no one has pointed it out to me. I created this song with the concept of a band performance by kids around 13 years old who are still learning to play instruments, using Kirby's motif in the intro as my little mischief. The track is currently playing in the background and I love it so much. It perfectly embodies what Mr. Tomita wanted the track to sound like, and the motif fits in so nicely. Question 7. As you're composing, do you ever worry that what you're writing sounds too samey to something you've already written? I haven't thought about it in that particular way, but thinking emoji. Question 8. Do you like Yoshi or Poochie better? Haha, let me answer that I like both equally. I will say Poochie is better, but that's understandable. Question 9. Nintendo doesn't upload their soundtracks online to listen to officially. From your perspective, why do you think they don't? I will refrain from speculation, sorry. This is understandable. Maybe one day we will get to hear the Epic Yarn soundtrack on Spotify. Just saying, Nintendo, adding your own music service to NSO expansion pack would immediately make it so much more worth it. Question 10. Do any of your compositions include live instruments, or do you use VSTs, virtual instrument libraries, most of the time? If the latter, which ones do you typically like? For Yoshi, I play and record instruments like harmonica and guitar, but most of the time I use VSTI, Virtual Studio Technology instruments. As someone who loves technology, I get excited about VSTs that evolve day by day. When I come across well-crafted VSTI or sample libraries, I feel a sense of deep respect for the developers. The reason I focused on piano and Kirby is because I listened to Synthology's Ivory 2. It left a lasting impression on me. This is pretty interesting. I didn't even notice how Yoshi's Woolly World used live instruments. And it's really cool how just a single VST heavily impacted Kirby Epic Yarn's soundtrack. Question 11. Do any of your compositions have an interesting backstory that stand out to you? I'll try to recall it. Dark Manor, Kirby's Epic Yarn. Just before lunch, I received a call from the director. They asked me to submit the haunted house level data to Nintendo within 30 minutes. Despite thinking it was impossible, a few seconds later I replied, "Sure, interesting, I'll give it a shot." I hung up and excitedly took on the challenge. I remember composing while hearing countdowns like 5 minutes left and 2 minutes remaining. Of course, this isn't something we normally do, laughs. Accomplishing that was an intriguing experience. While working on Kirby, I found myself needing to create another game. Upon calculation, I realized this new game required 40 tracks. To make matters more challenging, my production schedule for Kirby was already behind. However, I had an idea. If I composed 4 tracks per day, I could complete the new project in 10 days, then return to Kirby's development. It was an ambitious plan, especially considering the circumstances. Most people would likely refuse if their boss said, write 40 tracks in 10 days, but I embraced the situation, found excitement in the challenge, and went for it. While working on Yoshi, I decided to use an acoustic guitar. I played and recorded the title track myself, but I keenly felt my own lack of skill in playing. As a result, I attended guitar lessons for a while. It's stories like these that make me love interviews. If you gave me the Dark Manor track and some random other one from Epic Yarn, I would not be able to tell you which one was made in just 30 minutes, and that's really impressive. Question 12. Do you have any advice for those wanting to become a game composer? Let's see. While it is a common piece of advice, I recommend listening to various types of music, not just game music. Also, while playing games or watching movies, try to pay a little more attention to the soundtrack than you normally would. Oh, and this is just an observation, but many people aspire to create game music. Yet there seem to be fewer individuals interested in handling game sound effects. Exploring that area might be worthwhile. A lot of people seem to overlook sound effects, which is a whole different thing itself. Question 13. As someone who's looked into other second-party developers of Nintendo, what's it generally like collaborating with Nintendo when part of a second-party studio? Were they more involved than you expected, or the opposite? Yes, indeed. In my case, as I mentioned earlier, I was able to create more freely than I had anticipated. Whether this applies to others remains to be seen. From what I've looked into with Alpha Dream and even Skip, this seems to be true across the board. I'm sure Nintendo is more involved with bigger second-party games like Pokemon, but generally developers seem to have a lot more free reign. Well, except, you know. Question 14. That's all. Thank you for accepting this interview. Do you have any closing words? Thank you for offering the interview. If you'd like, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. You all better subscribe or I will be very disappointed. I'll be linking his socials in the description. I want to say thank you again so much to Mr. Tomita for accepting this interview, as I'm glad I was able to do this with someone whose music affected my childhood so much. I remember falling asleep to the Kirby's Pad theme when I was a kid, and in general, Kirby's Epic Yarn has such a soothing and beautiful soundtrack I will never forget. Keep an eye on my socials if you ever want to be alerted of when I'll be doing another interview, and you'll be able to submit your own questions I may use. See you next time.